Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to the inaugural TechKnow Invest Webinar, a new initiative presented in conjunction with Vertical Events. This online series expands the reach of the popular TechKnow Invest Roadshow, held each July, by giving investors, analysts, and industry followers the opportunity to connect year-round with leading ASX-listed technology, life sciences, and biotechnology companies. Importantly, these webinars will now run regularly throughout the year, providing ongoing exposure, engagement, and investor education ahead of the in-person TechKnow Invest conference next July. Thank you all for joining us today. A reminder that today's format is a 10-minute company presentation followed by a 5-minute live Q&A session. So if you've got any questions of the presenters, use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen, and I will put them to those presenters at the end of their formal presentation. Okay, let's get started. Our first presenter is Jason Carroll, CEO and Executive Director of Therapeutics, a company developing next-generation psychedelic-assisted therapies for complex neuropsychiatric conditions. Jason, welcome, and over to you.
Thanks so much, David, and hi, everyone. Thanks for joining a few of us today, and thanks to the TechKnow team also for kindly asking a number of us to present to you today. Tryptamine Therapeutics trades on the ASX with the ticker TYP, is advancing psychedelic science for disorders in neuropsychiatry. Our mission is actually pretty clear as to find an appropriate treatment landscape for conditions that have long resisted conventional therapies. Let me just move to slide 3, please. I say that Therapeutics is one of the best kept secrets on the ASX for a reason. Market cap's about $50 million. We have no debt, and we have a very strong shareholder base, including the directors of the company. Our leadership team comprises deep scientific expertise with proven capital markets experience. And importantly, our top 20 shareholders control more than half of the company shares, our top 100 more than 80%, reflecting a strong set of metrics and confidence in our vision. Next slide, please. At the heart of everything we do is an active ingredient called psilocin. Now, most people would understand things like magic mushrooms or psilocybin. You would have heard that a lot. Psilocin, maybe not as much. It's actually the active metabolite inside psilocybin. And as you can see here, psilocin's structural similarity from a molecule perspective compared to serotonin, the body's own natural mood stabilizer, allows it to activate the 5-HT2A receptor really, really tightly and very well. It's a critical pathway for neuropsychiatric modulation, and this mechanism actually underpins the therapeutic potential that we're harnessing here, which is a precise receptor level modulation that can actually reset dysfunctional brain circuits. Next slide, please. Our psilocybin programs, because Therapeutics has been around for a few years, 4 years in Canada, and obviously listed on the ASX about 1.5 years ago now. We've done a lot of work already with 3 NDAs that were approved through the FDA and run 3 clinical studies in 3 very important universities in the US. With psilocybin, we'd already demonstrated success in 3 major neuropsychiatric conditions: fibromyalgia, irritable bowel syndrome or IBS, and binge eating disorder. In fibromyalgia, patients reported improvements across pain, sleep, fatigue, and cognitive function, amongst others. In eating disorders, we actually had patients reducing to virtually 0 6 weeks after treatment, and durability of dosing with just 1 dose was out to 14 weeks, which was the end of the study. As part of that as well, what's interesting was depression and anxiety scores also halved across that 14-week period. Again, just with 1 dose, and you can imagine what these patients normally would go through with some of these conditions. And in IBS, which was considered to be one of the hardest to treat with a neuropsychiatric medication, 83% of patients had significant relief of their symptoms, again with a durability of therapy that extended out to 6 months. And a lot of the patients here you'll see didn't get to 6 months yet. They're still being recorded. But in terms of what we have so far, it's been really, really impressive. And these aren't just incremental improvements. They're actually transformational outcomes in conditions with limited treatment options in treatment-resistant patients. These aren't just patients who came off the street. These are the ones that have used multiple therapies to no effect. Next slide, please. The thing about, I think we're missing one slide, but the thing about what we're looking at here is recognized very early that oral psilocybin, as well as obviously working, it has significant drawbacks: unpredictable absorption, long treatment duration, and very limited ability to reverse the treatment once you start it. Once you take a capsule, you're kind of on that journey no matter what. So our solution is TRIP-8803, IV, psilocin infusion. Now, this approach really delivers a very rapid onset within 15 minutes, precise control of blood levels of the active ingredient that does the work in the brain, which is psilocin, and the ability to quickly reverse the psychedelic state if needed. So it's planned to be safer, planned to be more predictable, and obviously planned to be a far more scalable option than oral psilocybin. Next slide, please. So oral psilocybin has really been the backbone of most psychedelic programs to date. In fact, there are about 200 studies going on right now with psilocybin, which is interesting because natural products can't be patented. There's no IP available for a product from nature. So it's kind of surprising that so many companies are looking at psilocybin actually as a product. Even though it will work, there's not a huge commercial opportunity there beyond the actual indications itself. So once you've done that, other companies coming in and treating the same indications with psilocybin doesn't really make any sense. The reality here, though, using psilocybin is sobering. Now, as I said, this comes from nature, and there's a real reason why in the pharmaceutical industry, people don't take products just from nature and give them in a product form, because there are things that need to happen to that molecule to make it more effective, make it more readily absorbable, and obviously put IP around that opportunity. If you have something that will treat a disease, you want to make sure you can protect it for your shareholders and investors over time. Psilocybin takes up to 3 hours to reach a therapeutic blood level that's appropriate. And even then, the results here are really highly variable. In fact, 30% of patients will never actually achieve a target therapeutic window at all. And that can be very frustrating when people pay quite a lot of money for these kind of treatments to find that 3 in 10 won't get the result that they require. Attempts to escalate dosing only amplifies adverse events. So you can't even dose escalate here, which is quite unusual in pharmaceuticals, but in this particular one, this is the case. And physicians are kind of left a little powerless once the capsule is swallowed. And patients don't always have a journey that doctors are comfortable with, or even that patients are comfortable with. So for patients, what does this mean? It means that there's unpredictable efficacy, highly extended sessions that can last at least 8 hours for one session. And for clinicians, I wouldn't say it's a nightmare, but it's very difficult to understand that you have an uncontrolled dose. You have a patient where you don't know what's going to happen to that patient. And if something does happen and they want to stop this opportunity, they can't stop it. There's nothing they can do. And for investors, it's really a commercial model that simply doesn't scale. And that's why oral psilocybin, despite the hype and despite the interest, cannot be the future of precision neuropsychiatry. It may be used, but it will never be the future of this area. Now, TRP-8803 was designed to solve these problems head-on, transforming an unreliable, physician-averse treatment into a precise, controllable, and scalable therapeutic. Next slide, please. Looking at the company's phase 1 trial, this is the first time that TRP-8803 had ever been given to anyone anywhere in the world. This is 14 patients in phase 1. This was actually 2 different groups. One group was a normal weight patient population. The other one was an obese group patient population. And our phase 1 trial delivered exactly what we believe the field has been waiting for. and that's proof that psilocin can be administered safely, predictably, and reversibly across diverse patient cohorts, including normal and obese subjects. We achieved consistent blood levels within the therapeutic zone. And this is actually really a breakthrough in therapy. It means no more guesswork, no more variability, and no more reliance on weight-based dosing or an attempt to do weight-based dosing. So within about 15 minutes, often less than that, patients reached the desired therapeutic intensity. Adverse events were minimized. Most importantly, the psychedelic state could be quickly reversed. And we had one patient that's heart rate went slightly above 100, turned the dose off, came back down, turned the dose back on again, which really showed that this can be reversible at a time the patient needs it to be reversed or the doctor wants it to be reversed. So it gives physicians confidence, and it gives patients really a peace of mind going into this kind of a treatment, which can be apprehensive, can lead some patients to be a bit anxious about what's going to happen. This takes that away because they have the confidence the physician can control the dosing session. And for investors, it's really a de-risking milestone for this therapy. We now have a validated platform that eliminates the shortcomings of oral psilocybin and positions 8803 as the gold standard for precision psychedelic therapy. It's not just destined to be safer, it's also commercially viable, it's scalable, and it's protected by strong intellectual property, not just in 1 or 2 countries, but globally. Next slide, please. Now, this is a category that has been shunned by the pharmaceutical industry for a very long time. And it's only been quite recent that there's been a significantly greater interest in this category by large pharmaceutical companies. One of those is, of course, AbbVie, and AbbVie's $1.2 billion acquisition of a particular compound from Gilgamesh Pharmaceuticals, that's bretisilocin, highlights the growing appetite for rapid-acting psychedelic therapeutics. Our own program, with IP protection backing every step of the way, in fact, 6 patent families form part of our intellectual property protection. Across binge eating disorder, across IBS, and across fibromyalgia, as a starting point, positions us squarely in this emerging field. And with a market cap of just 50 million AUD, the valuation difference between a 2-hour infusion of a rapid-acting psychedelic agent is quite striking. Next slide, please. We're actually very proud to announce recently that we have our first patient enrolled, and we actually have our second patient enrolled today with news on the ASX this morning in the world's first binge eating study using IV-infused psilocin at Swinburne University. This is an open-label study with therapy support in adult patients, in patients suffering from BED. And this is treatment-resistant BED. Early interest actually has been really strong, and that's accelerating now. We have the support of the Butterfly Foundation, which is Australia's preeminent foundation in eating disorders, and they're supporting us in terms of how we're moving forward with this treatment. It's a condition with very, very little research being done in the past and very little therapeutic opportunities for patients to try and improve their condition and improve their lives. Next, please. I'd like to talk about the scale of the opportunity here. And the main reason for this is I mentioned there were a couple of 100 studies ongoing in psilocybin. Now, if you consider the amount of companies that are looking at traditional psychiatry as the backbone of their treatment, you're looking at depression, you're looking at anxiety, you're looking at PTSD. And I've often been asked the question around, well, why is Therapeutics looking at such fringe conditions? And I would say one thing, really, or 2 things. The first is these were fringe conditions because no one ever had used a psychedelic therapy in these 3 conditions before we did. And that's the reason why people haven't considered binge eating, IBS and fibromyalgia as psychiatry conditions, but they now are. And the opportunity there is huge. You can see the size of the current market. And these are people with very, very high unmet need. They spend a lot of money on trying to purchase various products to help them with their condition. And if you look at IBS and you look at fibromyalgia, they are larger than depression and anxiety markets globally combined. And we have this area all to ourselves for the next 20 years through our IP protection. So you can worry about the other colors on the other side, or look at the $72 billion global market that we have access to without having competition for a significant period of time. And that's really good news for investors. As well as that, we can also move into the other conditions whenever we like, because people can't copy our IP, but we can follow any psilocybin study that shows efficacy. We know that IV-infused psilocin will work. We can jump right into that condition whenever we feel like it. So we have the benefit of a whole cycle of opportunity here. Next slide, please. Our vision really is to place infusion chairs within psychiatry clinics themselves. There's space in there, there's opportunity in there, and physicians, especially in psychiatry, love to see how their patients improve. This ensures a scalability model and cost neutrality after the very first infusion. It's practical, it's capital efficient pathway to commercialization, and it enables rapid adoption across multiple indications. Next slide, please. Very robust global IP portfolio with patents covering the product itself, the way in which it's delivered, all psilocybin derivatives, the indications that we're going into, including fibromyalgia, IBS, and binge eating disorder, and our filings span all major pharmaceutical markets, securing long-term exclusivity and defensibility. The IP really is the backbone of our valuation and a critical differentiator in a very, very crowded field. Very, very briefly, we have a rich pipeline of, next slide, please, sorry. Very, very rich pipeline of catalysts. We try and make sure we can achieve what our investors are looking for. And we intend to be able to deliver some excellent data in the first quarter of next year in binge eating. We have another study coming up that we'll be announcing in fairly short order in the next month or two, which I think will reshape or transform psychiatry, and it'll be seen on a global stage as being a very, let's put it this way, a study that we think will change neuropsychiatry forever. I don't say that lightly, even though we're a very small company. Next slide, please. In summary, look, we're advancing a precision approach to neuropsychiatry. We're backed by really compelling clinical data, strong IP, and a scalable business model. We have access to markets that our competitors won't have, and we think we can transform patients' lives in a significant way in neuropsychiatry. So for investors, I think this is a very rare opportunity with a company with validated science, clear differentiation, and really enormous upside potential. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jason. Great presentation. Time for a couple of questions. Which indication do you believe offers the earliest value catalyst for investors?
Well, I have to say the one we're working on right now is the one that will see exactly how effective IV-infused psilocin will be in a population that has a high unmet need and is treatment resistant to existing therapies. So, I mean, the evaluation that AbbVie put on bretisilocin was based on one major depression study with 20 active patients in it. So if 20 patients of data really drove a decision to spend what was equivalent to 1.8 billion Australian dollars on an asset, what we think is going to be one of the major catalysts for us is seeing the first set of data from the patients in binge eating disorder. And then I can pretty much guarantee that the next study that we have planned will put people's minds at rest across a multiple number of indications that people wouldn't expect that a company of our size would be able to undertake. So I'd say in the next 12 months, people are going to see at least 60 to 80 patients being infused, and they'll see data on that I really believe is going to be truly powerful for this market.
And what is the pathway for scaling the infusion-based treatment model globally?
Yeah, the pathway, my background has been pure pharmaceuticals for essentially 30 years. And a lot of the work that I did in the US particularly was driving infusions with a product called Remicade. Remicade ended up being a peak year sales of about $10 billion a year. So you're talking about an enormous, mind-boggling size. And the model for that organization, and I drove a lot of this, which is why I got a nickname Jason Recliner, funnily enough, but trying to get chairs into clinics where there aren't historically chairs so you can actually carry out your infusions. So in gastroenterology, in dermatology and rheumatology, these physicians normally just treat a condition. They treat the disorder, not necessarily the patient. And what we found was the ability to get infusions inside the clinics themselves enabled the physician to really be able to track their patients, make sure they're doing well. They could see other patients at the same time as their existing patients were being treated. And it was actually a very significant financial benefit to doctors doing infusions in their clinics themselves. And we see psychiatrists as being probably the most caring specialty out of any of them. They really care about the outcome of their patients. And I think if they can actually see the results, then they'll join and come along.
Thanks, Jason. That's all we've got time for today, but the contact details are up on the screen. So if anyone's got a question, flick them through to Jason and I know he will respond in due course. So Jason, thanks for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it, David.
Our next presentation is from Cleo Diagnostics, a company developing a breakthrough early detection blood test for ovarian cancer based on the patented biomarker CXCL10. Presenting today are Dayna Louca, Cleo's Head of Corporate Development, and Dr. Andrew Stevens, Cleo's Chief Scientific Officer and the inventor of the biomarker technology. Dayna and Andrew, hopefully you'll be coming up on screen. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone. I might just start, if we can just maybe move forward to slide 4. Yeah, thank you. So I thought it might be useful just to give a bit of an overview around ovarian cancer to begin with, which of course is Cleo Diagnostics focus. So you might see there the title there, The Silent Killer. Ovarian cancer is actually one of the deadliest diseases affecting all women, with a really shocking mortality rate of over 51% of women dying within just 5 years of diagnosis. And as you can see along the bottom of the slide there, compared to other cancers such as breast cancer, cervical cancer, and bowel cancer, it really is alarmingly high. And the reason for this is that with other cancers, we've been able to largely reduce those mortality rates through things such as adequate screening tools or reliable diagnostics. And unfortunately, with ovarian cancer, that is not the case. We've got no screening tests and really no reliable diagnostic tool. And as a result, what you are left with is a lot of women that face unnecessary surgery and a lot of uncertainty. And I might just delve a little bit deeper into that surgery. So currently, surgery is the only way that you can diagnose ovarian cancer. And to speak to that in a little bit more detail, when a woman goes in for that surgery, there is often a lot of uncertainty around what will come out, whether it be, ovaries, fallopian tubes, or anything else. But what there is certainty over is that it's not going back in. And as a result, it's instant menopause, infertility, and also a host of other comorbidities as well. And that's really what Cleo's mission is. That's what Cleo is here to change. And so what we're doing is we're building what nobody else has. And that's the world's first blood test that can accurately identify ovarian cancer before surgery when it really matters. And as mentioned, our technology is underpinned by our biomarker, CXCL10, which is completely unique to Cleo and protected by strong IP. As mentioned, it was Dr. Andrew Stevens who founded our biomarker after over 15 years of research. And I'll pass over to Andrew shortly to tell you a bit more about the science that underpins Cleo's technology. But to touch on CXCL10, it really is changing what's possible in ovarian diagnostics. And that's because it behaves quite differently. It tends to light up in the presence of ovarian cancer and it remains silent in benign disease. And that differentiator essentially gives us the power to tell doctors with a lot of confidence who needs urgent intervention through surgery and who doesn't. And that's the alarming statistic around these surgery numbers. It's up to something like 90% of these women that go into surgery are basically found out to have a benign disease. So in summary, it was entirely unnecessary in the first place. So our technology is really changing that landscape. And through this, we're actually bringing to market 3 tests. So the first one is that pre-surgical tool, and then we'll basically culminate into our ultimate goal of bringing a global screening test to market. So think similar to how a woman has a pap smear for cervical cancer or a mammogram for breast cancer. Cleo is looking to bring the first screening test to market as well. And so with our first pre-surgical test, we're already well underway. We've had a few meetings with the FDA already, which have all been positive. We've secured access to national biobanks and leading biobanks, and now we've also partnered with Norcella to build out our economic case for reimbursement. So if we just go back to slide 3, just back one if we can. So what you're looking at, our market cap sitting around 70 million. And you'll see on the right, we've got a proven patented technology and we've got near-term revenue potential. And I've really always seen Cleo as a late-stage company with an early-stage market cap. And I think that that's probably the opportunity for investors on the call today. It's largely de-risked from a technology standpoint. It's been proven, validated in clinical studies, which Andrew will tell you more about. And now we're actually progressing towards an FDA submission in the US next year. So the next 6 to 12 months for Cleo are really shaping up to be very exciting. We're looking to submit to the FDA around mid-year and then launch into the US shortly after that, being the largest diagnostic market in the world. So I might hand over to Andrew now to tell you a little bit more about the company. And then, yeah, I'll be around for any Q&A as well. But thank you.
Thanks, Dayna. I assume I'll appear on the screen at some point.
Andrew, we can see you.
Okay, great. Yeah, look, thanks, Dayna. If I can get you to go back to slide 4, I might just reiterate a couple of those things Dayna was talking about, because this is a particularly nasty form of cancer for women. It has a very high mortality associated. One of the reasons, or one of the major reasons for that, is because there are no symptoms. So women actually don't know they have this disease, and even when it's quite advanced, the symptoms are very vague. Because of that, the majority of diagnoses are not made until it's at what we call a late stage, when the cancer has already grown and spread fairly extensively. And it's very difficult to surgically resect at that point. So recurrence is almost universal for patients. And generally these tumours after treatment will come back within about 12 months. And so all of those things contribute to the very short survival time for women. Now, the bizarre thing about this is that we don't have, obviously, screening for ovarian cancer the same way that we do for breast or cervical cancers or colon, that sort of thing. But we don't even have adequate diagnostic testing for these cancers, which sounds incredible, but it's true. If I can get you to go to the next slide. So currently what happens is if a woman has gynecological symptoms, a physician has to rule out cancer. And the way that that's done at the moment is to use transvaginal ultrasound, so imaging, so to take a picture of the ovaries and see if there are any strange looking lumps or bumps. And also use a blood marker called CA125. And I don't want you to read everything on the screen there. It's really just a comparator of CA125 and Cleo's testing. But CA125 is notoriously inaccurate. And in fact, for early stage cancers in particular, it has about 50% accuracy. So you can toss a coin and you get the same sort of result. But those two things together are used to assess risk of cancer. So they're not diagnostic, they're just a risk assessment. Based on that assessment, if there's any risk that a cancer might be present, that patient is then referred to a surgeon. Now, I just want you to remember, a diagnosis of ovarian cancer doesn't happen until after surgery. So any suspicious mass has to come out and be examined by a pathologist. Obviously, it doesn't go back in again. Now, that generally is a reasonably extensive surgery. It's obviously invasive. It removes, at the very least, the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and any other affected areas in the abdomen. Now, obviously, there's a risk associated with having surgery, but also, particularly around removal of the ovaries, there are other ongoing risks as well. So obviously, if it's a premenopausal woman, so a younger woman, she is instantly in menopause. She will never have children. For all women, there is then an elevated lifetime risk of diseases like dementia, osteoporosis, heart disease, stroke, and so on. So this is a really life-changing event for these women. But the key thing here is that up to 90% of those cases were not cancer in the first place. So these women never had cancer, and they didn't need that kind of surgery. And it's all because we don't have an adequate way to test these women before they go for surgery to work out how likely it is that that cancer is actually present. So really what we need is a test that can do that, something to decide who needs that sort of surgery, to decide the kind of surgeon they need to treat them, because at the moment, all of them go to a gynecological oncology surgeon, whereas in a lot of cases, they would certainly benefit from a different surgical expertise, and potentially a test to decide whether they even need that surgery in the first place. And that's the test that Cleo is bringing through to the market. So if we go to the next, perhaps slide 7, the testing that Cleo is developing is based on a marker called CXCL10. And this is something that came out of about 15 years of academic research. It's a protein marker that's produced very early in the life cycle of a cancer. It's not produced in non-malignant disease. And so for that reason, it's a very good marker of cancer. It's also produced very early, so it's a good marker of early stage disease. And it provides a very high sensitivity and high specificity for actually identifying and differentiating malignant growths from other things that happen in the ovary. If I can get you to go to the next slide. So that marker has been developed into a small panel, which is the basis of the Cleo blood testing. And on your screen are the metrics from over 300 women that have been tested using the Cleo test in a retrospective study. What you can see is the bar called RMI. That's the current clinical testing we use. Okay, so that's a combination of ultrasound and CA125. And I guess the most important one to look at is the right-hand side in postmenopausal women, because typically these cancers are most common in postmenopausal women. RMI is getting around 70% of these cases right. If you look at the light blue bar for Cleo, you're looking at 98.5%. So far and away, a substantial and material improvement over any existing testing that's out there at the moment. Now, that testing, in addition to the fact that obviously it's able to pick up early stage disease, that testing forms the basis for 3 different tests that Cleo is bringing through to the market. If I can get the next slide, please. So there are 3 areas that we're applying that technology to. The first and nearest term is what we call a recurrence test, a pre-surgical triage test. So that's the test to decide whether a woman is likely to have a cancer before having surgery. Now, we know that with some recent data analyses of healthcare providers in the US, there are just over 2 million of these patients who have testing every year. All right, so there's a fairly substantial market just for that testing alone. That's the first test that Cleo will bring through. The second test that we will bring to market is a recurrence test. So this is for women who have already had a diagnosis of ovarian cancer, and we know that those cancers will return. There's a much smaller number of patients, obviously, but they have repeat testing. And so there's somewhere between 1 to 2 million tests for that recurrence market every year as well. And then the third test that we will bring through, based on the proven ability to actually pick up early stage cancers, is a screening test. And this is where you actually regularly test, just like a pap smear, just like a mammogram, routinely test women each year or each 2 years and pick up those early stage cancers when they're at their most treatable. And in fact, if you can pick them up while they're still confined to the ovary, you have about a 95% success rate. So obviously the market size is very large. You're talking about every woman, and this is where you save lives. So those are the three areas that Cleo is bringing tests through. So where are we on this pathway? If I can have the next slide, please. So we have, I guess, been very simple and strategic and focused in what we've done. The foundation of all of this is good science. So all of Cleo's science has been independently reviewed and peer reviewed by experts internationally. It's published, it's publicly available. So unlike a lot of other people in the space, everything that we do, you can actually access the hard evidence yourself. It's freely available. So there's no smoke and mirrors, nothing to hide in Cleo's portfolio. Now, as Dayna mentioned, we're targeting FDA approvals. Well, we're targeting applications for FDA approvals, I should say, around halfway through this year, so in the second quarter of this year. Our 510(k) application we have been working on fairly extensively. We've had a number of meetings with the FDA already, which have been very positive. So that will be submitted, obviously. Supporting that, we're also about to commence our kit manufacturing and our clinical trial. So we've been running a pivotal trial in the US for about 12 months. That trial is almost completed and will complete, and the analysis commence within the next couple of months. So we're a fair way down the pathway there. The supporting activities around this as well. One of the issues, of course, is that you can have the best test in the world, but it's not very useful if no one buys it. We've been working since quite early in the piece to get key opinion leaders on board, and there will be some announcements made fairly soon. These are people who support the adoption of the testing, assist in developing the reimbursement case with us. But importantly, they're also people who will lobby their own clinical networks to act as early adopters. So they themselves will be early adopters. They'll have their buddies adopting the test as well. The other piece of that story is the health economic case. We recently commissioned a health economic analysis, and that analysis will be completed around the end of this year. And that's a study that gets presented to insurers to support the reimbursement case. It basically tells them how much money they're going to save by paying for the Cleo test. So all of those things are well on the way. And the other thing that I'm often asked is about how we're going to sell these tests. So the test, or the model, is a B2B model. So Cleo will sell these tests to pathology laboratories, and then the pathology laboratory provides the test to the patient. If I can just go to the next slide. So this is the go-to market plan, which really just reiterates everything I've said. Again, you don't need to read all of that text. We've defined our initial market. We know that there are 2 million women a year because we've got the data. We've got good science sitting behind us. Once again, published, hard evidence, all supporting the science and the underpinnings of the test. We've got some good industry partners and some key opinion leaders on board, and you'll see some announcements coming through fairly soon about both of those aspects for Cleo. And we've started the engagement process with US insurers, with US pathology labs, and with our early adopters. And in fact, our CEO has just returned from the US at some point last night, I think. He's looking a little bit under the weather, but he's been over there talking to pathology labs about placing instruments and so on. If I can go to the next slide, please. The last thing I'll touch on is our team. So our management and operational team is very strong. And in fact, the reason I say that is because almost all of these people have got direct experience of bringing these kinds of things from research underpinnings into the market. So these are people that have done it before. Our board also is very competent in the area. We have obviously, financial, scientific experts, but also key clinical experts in Tom Jobling, one of the most eminent gynecological oncology surgeons in the country and internationally, in fact. And Lucinda Nolan, who has a fairly long history chairing up an organisation called the Ovarian Cancer Research Foundation. And she was so impressed with the technology and what we're doing that she actually stepped down from that board to assist Cleo in getting this into the market. So a great team of people. If I can just get the second to last slide, please. So just a really quick summary. A good technology, strong IP position behind it, and strong science, and a very significant opportunity in market size and I guess in the ability to actually improve patient health and patient outcomes. The test that we have obviously is highly superior to anything that's on the market or even in fact in research stages. So we believe we're in clear water here. And we have a great team with the experience to deliver. So final slide, I believe, is just contact details. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you both for that detailed presentation. We do have time for a couple of questions. So a couple of questions have come through during your presentation, so we'll jump on to those. I suppose one, probably an obvious question, but what are the clinical and economic benefits for hospitals and insurers versus CA125?
Yeah, so I can answer that. CA125 has been around for about 40 years now. It is extensively used in this triage space, and it's used off-label, in fact, in almost every case. And there are quite literally millions and millions of these tests done around the world every year. It is inaccurate. That's the bottom line. Everybody knows it's inaccurate. As I say, particularly for an early stage cancer, it's about 50% accuracy, so you can toss a coin. It's pretty good for detecting late stage cancers, but obviously at the point that a cancer has become late stage, it's a little bit pointless because the treatment pathway is not going to change. And CA125, and this is one of the biggest problems with it, it's elevated in a lot of non-malignant conditions, and it can be things as simple as women who exercise, for example, will have higher levels. Different levels in pre and postmenopausal women, different levels associated with, if you have a benign cyst, for example. So it's a notoriously inaccurate marker. It has no diagnostic capacity whatsoever, but it's all we have, and it's clinical practice, and it's mandated in guidelines. So we're fairly confident that simply swapping out CA125 for a Cleo test would be a substantial benefit, particularly around the ability to accurately triage patients. In the US in particular, all of these patients are going to oncology centers, which means that not only are you using up the far more expensive resources of highly trained oncology surgeons, you're also preventing patients who do have cancer from actually getting treatment. And there are some fairly strong pieces of evidence saying that the outcomes of patients are or patients having adverse outcomes because they're not getting to treatment fast enough. So that's really what we're aiming to change. And that's for the health insurers, that's what's going to save them a lot of dollars.
Now, we are at time, unfortunately, but there are a couple of questions that are sitting in the Q&A section that Dayna or Andrew, if you could jump in and answer them directly. And as you can see on the screen, the contact details are there. So if you do have any other questions of Dayna and Andrew, please send them through directly. But thank you both for your presentation.
Thank you.
Our next presenter is Dr. James Garner, CEO of Percheron Therapeutics, an emerging immuno-oncology company advancing HMBD-002, one of the most clinically advanced antibodies targeting VISTA, a major next-generation checkpoint inhibitor target. James, over to you.
Thanks very much, David, and good morning and good afternoon to everybody. It's a pleasure to be here today. Really looking to build on a presentation we gave at the in-person TechKnow conference a couple of months ago. We've had some really good progress since then, which I'm going to try and provide a quick update on here. But also this presentation is to serve as a bit of an introduction for those who are new to the story. So if I can jump ahead 2 slides, please. We're building really on a theme of the previous presentation about cancer, but obviously we're a therapeutics company rather than a diagnostics company. And we're specifically working on a drug called HMBD-002, as David touched on in his introduction. And we'll talk a little bit more about why we think this is an exciting opportunity, why we think it's distinguished from other drugs in the cancer space. But I do want to highlight right up front a couple of key points about this. And perhaps the most important is that this is a relatively late stage asset. This drug has completed phase 1 human testing, and that work has been done in the United States under the oversight of the US FDA. So we're really at the point in the development of a drug where things get exciting, where we're really looking for definitive signals of efficacy. And we'll talk a little bit in a moment or two about how we plan to do that. So again, if I could jump ahead 1 slide, really want to try and just orientate things a little bit by talking about immuno-oncology, which is the field that we inhabit. And immuno-oncology is something that's really come into being over the last couple of decades. I would say, in all honesty, it is perhaps one of the most exciting developments in medicine of the 21st century. And the premise is this: for a tumor to become established, it has to switch off the immune system around it. It has to suppress the immune system so that it can take root. Without that, the immune system will clear out tumor cells just in the same way that it clears out bacteria and viruses in normal everyday life. So we have a whole host of technologies that work by either reactivating or by augmenting the immune system. And you can see some of those illustrated on the right hand of this slide: cancer vaccines, CAR T and CAR NK technologies, companies like Aravella Therapeutics, but also this field called checkpoint inhibitors. And broadly speaking, what we're trying to do with checkpoint inhibitors is to switch the immune system back on. It's to cancel out this negative signal from the tumor, switch the immune system back on, let the body's own defenses deal with the tumor. Next slide, please. And this is a little bit detailed, but I just want to give you a little bit more context here. So there are already a number of drugs which do this. This isn't just a thought bubble. This is an important category of cancer drugs. Most of the existing drugs target a protein on the surface of cells called PD-1. And those drugs, together with one other drug targeting another molecule called CTLA-4, in aggregate represent about $40 billion of sales. The 800-pound gorilla in the field is a drug called Keytruda, also known as pembrolizumab. That alone is $25 billion plus of sales. But people have been looking for the next big thing after PD-1. And one of the most exciting targets is something called VISTA. That's what we target. You can see at the bottom of the left-hand panel of the slide, HMBD-002. It is a VISTA inhibitor. And that is how we're trying to reactivate the immune system. Of interest, there's another Australian company working in this space targeting another novel checkpoint inhibitor called LAG-3. That company is Imutep, and really encourage people to follow their journey. They're a couple of years ahead of us, but gives a sense of what the development of one of these drugs can look like. Next slide, please. Now, other people have tried to approach VISTA. So you might ask, well, why are we advantaged? What have we got that nobody else has got? And very, very broadly speaking, the answer is safety. Most of the other drugs that other companies have tried to take into human testing to inhibit VISTA have been quite toxic drugs. Now, we've got a different approach. Our drug is of a different type than the others. It is called an IgG4 antibody. I won't bore everybody with going into what that means, but all the other drugs that have been tried in human patients have been IgG1 antibodies. Theoretically, we would expect an IgG4 antibody to be much safer, and in practice, that turns out to be absolutely the case. So we do have, in principle, a drug that is not only best in class, but also first in class. It is the most advanced of all the drugs in the world inhibiting this target. Next slide, please. And when I say that it is the most advanced, as I mentioned earlier, we have completed phase 1 human testing in the United States. We'll talk a bit more about that data in a moment. But we've also made huge progress with things like learning how to manufacture this drug and with all the supportive work, all the animal toxicology data and all those sort of things that agencies like FDA require. So what is ahead of us now is phase 2 human trials. And that is always, for almost any drug, where the rubber hits the road. That is where we're looking for definitive signals of efficacy. That's, of course, the thing that excites investors, it excites potential partners, excites regulatory agencies. And we're going to be starting phase 2 human trials next year, 2026. Next slide, please. So I want to talk just briefly about our phase 1 study, and this study was conducted at 6 cancer centers in the United States, and they were some of the top cancer centers in the world, centers like MD Anderson, Stanford University, Yale, Cedars-Sinai, and so on. It was a large study, 48 patients. 28 of them just had our drug by itself, but also 20 of them had it in combination with Keytruda, pembrolizumab, the drug I mentioned earlier. We wanted to understand at a very early stage what the safety profile looked like in combination. Now, phase 1 studies are always safety studies. We are primarily looking to answer the question, is the drug safe? And this drug is extremely safe. We saw very, very few toxicities at all with this drug. It is, in my experience, almost uniquely safe for a cancer drug. And that's fantastic news because that makes us very, very confident about putting it into patients and combining it with other drugs. But if we go to the next slide, please, we also saw some indications of efficacy here. Now, as I say, phase 1 studies are safety studies. They're not designed to really give us an efficacy signal. But as you can see here, about a little more than 1/4 of the patients have what we call stable disease. That is to say that for extended periods of time, their cancer did not get worse. We slowed it down. And just to be clear, very, very few medicines are in the business of curing cancer. Sadly, the way we do that, even now, is mainly through surgery and radiation therapy. But if we can slow cancer down, if we can make it more amenable to treatment by other modalities, that is huge progress. And as you can see here, we had quite a number of patients in this study showing that. And if we go to the next slide, I can contextualize this a little bit by comparing it to a number of other approved cancer therapies. You see in the left-hand bar there, our results from our phase 1 study. And then the remaining 5 bars, you can see just a selection, almost a random selection of 5 approved cancer therapies. Each of these have been billion-dollar products. That is to say, they've generated over $1 billion in annual sales. And as you can see, the results at phase 1 look very similar to ours. So obviously, individual mileage varies between cancer drugs, but we feel like our data is very consistent with what we would expect to see for a potentially successful cancer drug at this stage in development. Next slide, please. And finally, we did see a number of patients with really, really interesting results that gave us a lot of encouragement that our drug is moving the needle. And you can see a few of these individual patients here. You can see also here just a sense of how advanced and how late stage these patients were. They'd all been dealing with cancer for 2, 3, 4 years or more. They'd all had and failed multiple previous lines of therapy. So these were patients who, sad to say, were very, very much at the very end of their disease. But nevertheless, we saw in many of these cases shrinkage of the tumor. And by the way, tumors don't usually shrink by themselves. So when we see a tumor getting smaller, we get interested because that usually shows our drug is doing something. And we also saw these patients staying on treatment for extended periods of time. These would typically be patients whose life expectancy would be measured in months. And as you can see, we had some of these patients on drug, stable disease, not getting any worse for 6, even 12 months at a time. So certainly some very encouraging data coming out of this phase 1 study. Next slide, please. So what are we going to do next? Well, I won't go through all the detail here, but just to summarize, we've got what we think is a very, very innovative approach to phase 2. And the broad goal is the one you see at the top of this slide, to minimize time and cost and risk. We recognize that we can't do this kind of study in the way that Pfizer or Lilly or GSK would. We don't have infinite budgets and hundreds of people. So we've taken a very innovative approach, which we think should give us a faster, cheaper readout that we can then use to pitch the drug. So on the next slide, you get one sense of this. This is going to be a study that looks at multiple different tumor types in parallel. So instead of putting all our eggs in one basket and saying we're going to just look at thyroid cancer or just look at gastric cancer, we have the ability to look at multiple tumor types in parallel. That gives us multiple shots on goal, but it also lets us, to some extent, cut our suit according to our cloth. So depending on our resources, our financial wherewithal, and so on, we can start different arms of the study at different times. As each one gets a readout, we can report that, but we can customize our study to some extent according to what looks most interesting and according to, frankly, what we can afford to do. Next slide, please. Each arm of the study will be modular. And what that means is that instead of just recruiting 500 patients and coming out 3 years later and telling you whether the drug works or not, we'll recruit patients in stages. And that way, if we see that one of these arms looks much more promising than the other, we can focus our resources on that. If another one of them looks less exciting, we can dial that one down. So it gives us an ability to calibrate our investment according to where the data looks most promising. And it also gives us a much greater density of readouts. Each stage of this will give us an ability to come and talk to investors and partners about what we're doing. And so we think this kind of modular approach gives us a really nice way to sort of almost get a real-time readout on how our drug's doing. Next slide, please. So just to wrap things up, what are the particular cancer types we're looking at here? 4 priorities that we've identified at the moment: triple-negative breast cancer, the most aggressive and most treatment-resistant form of breast cancer, a particular form of lung cancer, esophageal cancer, and endometrial cancer. And we didn't just pick these out at random. These are particular cancer types where there is at least a theoretical reason to believe that our drug may be particularly efficacious, but they are also ones where we think we can relatively easily and cost effectively run a clinical study, and where we think there's a substantial commercial opportunity. So we've tried to solve for both scientific and commercial considerations right up front. And next slide, please, which is my last one. What does this translate to for us as a company? A lot of detail here, but just to really boil it down, I think there's a lot of news flow coming through in the next year or so. You can see some of the indicative milestones we think we're going to be talking about next year and the year after and the year after, and some indication of where the time frame starts to look like for us to really get maximum engagement with potential partners and eventually with regulatory agencies like FDA. So we're on a journey. We're at the beginning of it, but I think it's an exciting journey ahead, and I think there'll be a lot happening in 2026 for our company. So really look forward to sharing that journey with everybody as we go. Thank you very much.
Thanks, James. Great presentation. I'll lead with probably the most obvious, because the big blue box in the middle of the screen. Can you discuss partnering interest from major pharmaceutical companies? What does it look like, and when do they get engaged?
David, it's a great question. Look, for us, they get engaged sort of almost now, really. It's something we'll be starting early in the new year. Now, that's not to say we're going to partner the drug in January or February or March, but we start those discussions early, because partnering with big pharma companies can be a long courtship. We want to make sure that we give these companies a long time, a long runway to sort of get familiar with the drugs, get familiar with us, so that when we come to them with data, whether that's sort of late 26, early 27, they already know the story well. They've done a lot of their diligence, and they can act quickly on it. So that discussion starts early. In terms of the kind of transaction we're looking for here, well, there's a million different shapes and sizes to these things. Obviously, a lot of companies focus on the one big deal, to a Pfizer, a GSK, a Novartis. And those deals typically command some tens of millions of US dollars in upfront payments and many hundreds of millions in subsequent payments. But also sometimes companies partner in stages. They might partner, one country or one territory first and then, save the bigger ones for later. We're relatively agnostic to what this looks like. I think we just really want to get the best result for shareholders. But there's a lot of different ways to approach this, and many of our team have been through this journey before. So I think we're open-minded to the possibilities.
Last question. As you say, a busy slide, which indicates the amount of work that will be undertaken over the next couple of years and the importance of that work. But if you had to pull out a couple of key milestones, what should investors be watching for in 26?
I think the most important thing is the startup of our phase 2 study. And so there'll be a number of milestones that sort of represent the operational machinery of that. We'll try and be as transparent as we can with the market. So we'll share with folks where we're going in terms of regulatory submissions, ethics submissions, approvals. And then eventually when we get our first patient in, nothing is more important for a drug development company than doing drug development. In other words, to run clinical trials. And that's what really gets us on the radar. That's what gets people talking about us. And that's what puts us on a clear path towards data and to all the things that flow from that. So I think the milestones and the progress markers that reflect our progression towards a live phase 2 study, those are going to be the most exciting things for investors and usually significant sources of value.
Thanks, James. A great presentation. Clearly excited about the future, a strong news flow ahead, which investors love. So we watch with interest. James, thanks for your time.
Thanks, David. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to introduce Brian Leedman, Chairman of BlinkLab, which is pioneering an AI-powered smartphone platform capable of screening for autism and ADHD using digital biomarkers, providing a faster and more scalable diagnostic pathway. Brian, over to you, and thanks for your time. We can't seem to hear you, Brian.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, got you loud and clear. Thanks for that.
Wonderful. All right. So, sorry about the false start. So, next slide, please. And the next one. So, I just wanted to just start here and say that, BlinkLab has been around for a little over a year. We've had a pretty good share price run in the last 12 months. Market cap's actually a bit higher than that since the 20th of October. We actually have been hitting record highs pretty much every week for the last few weeks. I think the reason for that is simply because we're doing what we said we were going to do, and basically in the time frame that we said we would do it in. And we're actually in the most topical and exciting space in healthcare today, which is in the early diagnosis of autism and ADHD. Largely the reason why we've done so well this year is because of the fantastic team that I have around me, led by Hank and also Anton. And essentially, we've done what we said we would do. And we recently delivered some fantastic results from our clinical study in the United States, which is our FDA pilot study, which is the forerunner to our main FDA main trial or the regulatory study, which is coming up. So we're well funded. We did a capital raise earlier this year. We've got plenty of cash, and we're moving into the major trial starting in January. So I think that's going to create a lot more growth in the share price, particularly if we ultimately get a positive outcome, and that then leads to FDA approval. So let me describe, next slide, what it is that we're doing. Next slide. Yeah. So what is autism? I mean, we all know, we've heard of this thing, autism. We know that it's a major problem. It has a significant impact on your social development and language skills, sensory and behaviors, and so forth. And next slide. And the economic burden of this is only going up tremendously. And you can see on that slide that the cost in Australia in terms of prevalence is, for some reason, it's much higher in Australia. I don't necessarily think that's really true. Maybe the testing methods that we have here are better. in other countries, but we know it's going up and up. And in terms of the NDIS, it's just an incredible outlay for the NDIS. We're spending more money on autism and diagnosis and treatment of autism for children in the NDIS than any other subset, about 35%. And it's only going up and up and up. And we are spending almost as much on the NDIS as we do on defence. So it's about 2% of our GDP is spent on NDIS. We're scheduled to go to 2.5% on defence in the next year or so. So that gives you an idea of the economic burden. Now, next slide. Now, the reason why there is such a burden here is because there's 3 to 5 years of uncertainty, typically for a family with a child who has autism. And it starts always at the same way. You've got the parents who are concerned with the behaviour of their child. Parents know their kids. They can see the behavioural problems going back to 1 or 2 years of age. They go and see their GP. The GP then is the gateway, effectively, to seeing a specialist, in this case a neuropsychiatrist or psychologist, and that always ends up leading to a late diagnosis of 5 to 6 years old. And there's a lot of things that could have been done for that child had the child been diagnosed earlier. That's simply not possible. And we've seen it on the front page of newspapers right across Australia about this huge burden in terms of the time it takes to actually get a diagnosis. So that is familiar to, I'm certain, all the people in the audience here today, that this is a long time. And effectively, the problem is that a lot of these kids are actually they're not autistic or ADHD. They're just slow developers. But the system gets bogged down with constantly having to assess these kids, leading to this long wait time. Now, next slide. So this is where BlinkLab comes in, and we're using a smartphone. This is it. And people familiar with my previous company in ResApp Health, that was just a smartphone too. And we had a tremendous outcome with that company when we were acquired by Pfizer in September 22 for a great deal of money. This is also a smartphone technology. And assuming it's regulatory approved, it will be used by the GPs to provide a diagnosis based on a reaction, a facial response, that the smartphone is giving stimulus to the child and the forward-facing camera is analysing their face. Now, this is effectively, will be a screening test. It'll be able to screen those kids out of being autistic, because most of them are not. So you really want a tool that is actually a ruling or a screening out test. That's the biggest commercial opportunity here. And that would then lead to shorter wait times to actually get a formal assessment from the psychiatrist. And that leads to early intervention. And of course, we all know in medicine, the earlier you can intervene in anybody with any illness, the better the outcome for that patient. Next slide. So, as I've just explained, we're evoking a facial reflex. The smartphone's pretty smart. It's analysing all different aspects of your face, and the forward-facing camera is analysing and then analysing that, and then it's providing a diagnosis. It's really simple. The technology behind it, of course, is incredibly complex, and a lot of artificial intelligence, machine learning. We've got a fantastic team of developers that have been working for years and years on developing this technology, which we actually licensed from Princeton University, and all the IP is licensed exclusively from them. We've got patents all over the world for this tech, and it's really quite unique. Next slide. So what you can see on this slide is that in terms of just the simple approach of a blink, so when we're invoking the facial reflex, the stimulus that makes you blink, you can see on the control group there's no blinking going on. But with the autism, we've got a reaction. Now, the way the blink is that's actually a soft sound in front of a loud sound. So you can see in the autism, the second graph there, that the children are actually reacting to the second louder noise. And you can see that the closure of the eye movement is much more responding to the second beat. But in terms of ADHD, the difference is they're actually reacting first to the softer sound. Now, those two sounds are only milliseconds apart. So you only hear the one beat, and it's actually two. So you can see from the ADHD slide that they're acting first to the softer sound. Now, that's an important distinction that our algorithms can then determine to make that diagnosis, be it autism, ADHD, or even comorbidity. Or or a control in terms of neurotypical, so nothing wrong with them at all. Next slide. So we're beyond blinks, we're tracking all kinds of things. It's not just the facial blinking response, it's hand movements, it's eye movements, it's face movements. We're tracking a whole range of things that go into that algorithm. Next slide. And this just gives you an idea in terms of some of those, you know, screen avoidance and head rotations, headphone touches, all these things are all being analyzed by the smartphone, and that goes into the algorithm. Next slide. And then again, mouth openings, pupil range. These are all the, I just wanted to use these slides to demonstrate that it's not just blinking. There's a whole bunch of things that are going into making the algorithms as smart as they can be. Next slide. So we already did a very large study, and this was a study that we published providing results of sensitivity 91 and 85%. Now that's basically been the feature of the BlinkLab story throughout this entire year. This was a study that we did on 430 odd kids, or 441 actually, and we trained our algorithms on this. And this is how we ended up with the high sensitivity specificity, but all this is now in the past. And so next slide. Actually, before I talk about the big one, I'll just talk about the competition. Yes, there are two other companies, Cognoa and ETD. Cognoa is a de novo, which means it was a first in class. Now you can see the sensitivity specificity scores are really poor and really quite a useless technology, but it's not really that smart. It's using a smartphone, yes, but it's really a collection tool for the doctor to remotely assess you. So it's not very clever at all. ETD are definitely clever. They're using the same sort of technology that we are, but they're not using a smartphone. They're using high-speed cameras set up in a hospital room. So it's not scalable. But more importantly for BlinkLab, we have a predicate. It is a de novo predicate through Cognoa. And ETD got what's called a 510K, which means it was an approval based on a predicate. That's important for investors to know, because you want to know your technology is approvable. And so in the case of BlinkLab, our results are certainly superior to Cognoa and ETD. Now, they're both private companies. We don't have any access to their sales data or anything like that, but they're not as good, and they're certainly not scalable. Next slide. Now, this is the one that really set the share price flying recently in the last few weeks. So we did a real final validation study. Now, it was a pilot study, but it was a big pilot study, 485 patients, but this was a full gamut of children, from the very mildly autistic to the very autistic. The results that we had before of the 9186, they were different. Those were a training trial that was done on children that were more in the medium to high range in autism. This one had a full real FDA study about the situation that we had to demonstrate. So it was a real stress test on our algorithms, and we performed fantastically. And I wanted to let the viewers know, what does 85% really mean? You cannot get 100% diagnosis, because the gold standard, which is the psychiatrist making the assessment, is a subjective test, right? A subjective test, whereas this is an objective test. So their test is never going to be 100%. They will get it wrong. So we can never be 100% accurate. And as I understand it, the theoretical ceiling of what we could actually achieve is about 85%. So we are right there. And that was on a significant pilot study with 2 major centers in North America. Next slide. So this is the big one, the 510K registrational study. There's not just 2 sites. If you look at those names of these hospitals, I mean, what a neglected group of the most prestigious centers of autism research in the world. And, you know, we just announced only a couple of days ago the Rush University in Chicago, Illinois. We have the Vanderbilt Kennedy Center, one of the most prestigious centers in the world. What a great group of organizations that we're partnered with to enroll these 528 participants. So not much larger than the one we just completed. It's still a double-blind trial. It's basically the same parameters of what we've already achieved. And the FDA has advised us that we only need a minimum of 65% to get that approval. we're currently running around 85%, which is the theoretical ceiling of what we can actually achieve. So this is the trial that's going to really drive the share price in next year. You can see we've got a great geographical spread. That's important because we have to show this technology works with kids of all creeds and colors. So we have to have a full geographical spread in North America. And that study will start enrolling patients in January. And there will be a lot of news as we start rolling through, enrolling the patients and then ultimately getting our result in the third quarter. And then we move to either an exit, trade sale, or commercial deals to commercialize the technology. Next slide. So just to finish off on the IP, this is the most important slide, really. If you've got a company that's as exciting as ours, you're really going to get inbound interest, like I did with my previous company, ResApp Health, when we were acquired by Pfizer. It all comes down to the IP. Our IP is all licensed from Princeton University. This is extremely well protected. That's important. R&D really stands for replicate and duplicate. At least that was my experience with Pfizer, and they realized they couldn't do it, so they bought the company. We have an enormous market opportunity with BlinkLab, and the IP is solid. And with that, I'd like to open up to questions, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brian. Great presentation. Couple of questions have come through. What feedback are you receiving from clinicians on adopting digital biomarkers in routine care?
So the feedback from them is that they absolutely want it, but they want to know that it works. So getting FDA approval is without doubt the most significant achievement that we can make. If the FDA only give FDA approval if it does what it claims it can do. So if it does that, it's like any drug. It's the FDA is effectively a label that's put on a bottle of pills. It said this is what it does and this is the safety risk. Of course, we don't have any safety risk with our technology, but it has to do what it claims it can do. And if it does that, then the doctors will adopt it. So the answer is absolutely, but not. It's actually, by the way, it's not just the FDA approval. If we get 65% for our FDA approval, I would imagine the adoption rate would be lower than, say, if we were getting results in the 80s. Okay, because that would be theoretically as good as they could possibly do. So this is that would be a major indication in terms of the adoption.
And beyond autism and ADHD, what other neurological conditions could the platform address?
Well, it's quite remarkable. We're talking about an objective test for neurological conditions, and I didn't really talk about ADHD much in this presentation. It's pretty much all been about autism, but I should tell the audience that we have a rather large 400-odd patient CE mark, which is the European FDA standard, taking place in the Netherlands, which is going to read out in the first quarter of next year. And that could be the basis of a regulatory approval in Europe for ADHD, which is 5 or 6 times bigger market than autism. In terms of other indications, I mean, there are exciting opportunities like depression or dementia or all kinds of things that could be developed. The question is, will BlinkLab develop these technologies, or will they be developed by the company that acquires us with their enormous resources? That's probably my objective. I would like to see these other conditions being pursued by a bigger body with bigger resources so that I can provide an exit to my investors at hopefully a very high level. But it's possible that we may end up pursuing these opportunities ourselves. This is something for the future to decide.
Final question. What's your commercial strategy for scaling across the US and Europe?
Well, commercial strategy for scaling, I mean, we will talk more about our commercial go-to-market strategy going into next year. I think I've made it clear what my objective is. I like to have a trade sale. I'm an entrepreneur. I like building companies. I like to sell the companies and move on to another venture. There will be, that's not to say that we've ignored the commercial pathway, that is very much being focused on, and we will talk more about that. But when you have to scale up and start selling your product, you need a sales force. And the biggest sales forces in the medical world is big pharma, like Pfizer that acquired my previous company, ResApp Health. They've got a sales force that beats everyone else. So if we have to scale up to build a sales force, that will be an expensive exercise and a long time. to get to higher sales. So that's why I like the exit strategy of simply licensing deals or acquisitions. But that said, there will be more talk about how we would have a go-to-market strategy. That's not something we've ignored. There are forces within the BlinkLab board that think that we should definitely go down the commercialization route and become a huge company ourselves. So that's why we have a board of various people's views, and all this is going to come to fruition next year, I think.
Ryan, thanks for that, and we wish you all the best for the future. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate it, and thanks again to everyone from the team over there, and I think it's been a great year for healthcare.
Thanks, Brian. Our final presenter today is Nicholas Medley, Executive Chairman of Findy Group, a fintech delivering integrated payments and digital banking solutions across high growth markets. Nicholas, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here today and giving a little bit of an update on the business and how things are performing in India. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Thank you. So Findy as a business has more than 175,000 touch points across India for both its physical and digital businesses. So on the physical side, we're in 28 states and 8 territories for our ATM product. We have in excess of 12,500 ATMs currently operating across India, and that's across 2 segments. One segment is brown label ATMs, where we own and operate on behalf of major banks, their ATM networks across India. And then we have white label ATM operations, which is where we partner with franchisees. We own the ATM and it is branded Findy. And we acquired a business last year from Tata, which gave us a national footprint of more than 4,600 ATMs. And I'll also give an update on this in terms of how that sales pipeline of growing that business in terms of acquiring new merchants is expanding very, very nicely. We turned that sales channels back on in September of this year. And as we updated the market just a week or 2 ago, that was in excess of 1,200 franchisee sales in almost 45 days. So very happy with how that channel is now coming through. And then on our digital banking side, which is cornerstoned by Bankit, which is a business we acquired at the very start of this financial year for us to complement our existing FindyPay business. As mentioned, that is now in every state and territory across India, more than 175,000 KYC locations and a further 100,000 non-KYC locations on top of that. And that business, as we updated the market, has now hit record numbers. We're in excess of 5.3 billion GTV, and we're acquiring merchants organically at the tune of between 2,000 and 3,000 per month, steady state every month. So growing very, very nicely since we acquired that. The business is now in excess of 30% from our digital sources across our entire business, which is obviously up significantly from last year. The market opportunity for us is huge in India. It's the most populous country in the world, more than 1.4 billion people. There's 350 million people that are currently unbanked, or 25% of the adult population. We are working very, very, very closely to ensure that our mission is actually delivered, which is to actually serve as a vehicle that drives the unbanked towards financial inclusion and social mobility. And the way that we're also doing that is not only helping these 350 million unbanked, but also the additional 450 million that we would call underbanked. So there's more than an 800 million target market for both sides of this business. And India as a market is quite unique. Both cash is growing in circulation and cash as a percentage of GDP is continuing to grow, as well as digital. So both sides of our business are really well positioned to take profits and take opportunities for growth over the coming 3 to 5 years. If we can go on to the next slide, please. As I've spoken through, there are a number of key investment themes that really underpin Findy and what we're doing and wanting to deliver over the next 3 to 5 years and beyond. We have very favorable tailwinds. As said, cash in circulation is increasing. ATM penetration rate is very, very low in India, only 21 per 100,000. Global average is 39. Market like the US is almost 160 ATMs per 100,000, and countries like China are at 95 plus per 100,000. The Reserve Bank of India would like to see ATM penetration rates closer to 35 per 100,000, and they're really supporting that with their own policies. And what they have done recently is they've actually increased the interchange rate, making it more profitable for us to deploy our white label and brown label ATMs across India. And we expect there to be further increases in the future as well in that interchange rate, with the Reserve Bank of India on average increasing that interchange rate every 2 years. It's now at 19 rupees per cash withdrawal and effectively 8 rupees per balance inquiry. And the reason why they're wanting to do that is they obviously want more ATMs deployed so they can increase that financial inclusion and bank more of that unbanked number that I spoke of. We have a very robust BLA business with long-term contracts. Average contract value or tenure for us is 7 odd years. More than 80% of our revenues on that side of the business have 7 years or longer tenure. We just recently won a significant new contract with the State Bank of India. That was more than 4,250 ATMs that we're currently deploying at the moment. That will see, that's a 7+3 contract, so 10 years there on that side. As I also mentioned, we have a fast-growing digital business. We have in excess of 30% of our revenues now coming from the digital side of the business. We're targeting for that to go closer to 45 to 50% over the next 2 years, and looking for that to exceed 40% as we strive towards our Indian IPO of our subsidiary TSI India at the back end of next year. So we're targeting a listing window of December 2026 through to March 2027. And as you can see here as well, our GTV has increased 43% in that business since April 2025. So very happy with how that's performing. As I mentioned as well, we've had very strong growth in our white label business in terms of franchisee sales. When we turned sales on in the first 30 days, we delivered 560 white label sales. That was from the 15th of September to the 15th of October. By the end of October, that 560 sales had actually accelerated to in excess of 1,233 as we announced to the market at the start of November. As also mentioned, we've successfully completed 2 acquisitions, one on the Bankit being on the digital side and the other being Tata's white label ATM business. And then finally, we've had a strong track record of delivering profitability with our management team as we go through, and we're now largely funded for our CapEx rollout. And I'll also give an update as to where we're at with that process, which is very, very positive in the last few weeks. Can we have next slide, please? As I've spoken about, we're here to be working towards a listing of our Indian subsidiary on the Indian Stock Exchange. We've gone through 3 phases, or we've got 3 phases of which we've delivered 2 now. One was stage 1 was the portfolio diversification and expansion, having a truly national business for our physical part of the business. The second was focusing on our digital transformation and growth side, which is the future as we continue to grow on. The acquisition of Bankit was able to accelerate that for us. We had organically grown our digital business from 5,000 locations when we took over the business some 3 years ago to more than 60,000 locations. But as stated, that Bankit acquisition now means that we've got more than 65,000 locations across India that have full KYC, and a further 100,000 locations that are going through that KYC process. And we're in every state and territory. And then the final pillar that we're going through, and which we're starting now, is the initial public offering, which is stage 3, to unlock significant shareholder value. The valuation ranges that we've been given by our investment bankers and lead brokers on that is 750 to 900 million. And at those levels, that would mean that we would be able to unlock for existing Findi shareholders more than 1 times our current market cap in cash coming back to Australia. So a very exciting time for where we're at, and also a great optionality for our business, because we will still have a significant ownership in that business post-listing, but we'll also have a significant capital return as a result of that, and we'll have a subsidiary that is also sitting with significant amount of cash and 0 debt. If we can have next slide, please. The other element that the IPO of our Indian subsidiary does for us is actually delivers the final pillar for us to be able to become eligible for a full-fledged payments bank in India. The final criteria that we don't actually meet at the moment is foreign ownership. We must be less than 75% foreign owned. And that IPO event that we're talking about delivering in December 26 and March 27 is a great way to deliver that final criteria and also realize significant value for shareholders at the same time. Next slide, please. Next slide. Just wanted to highlight a couple of points that we've gone through. 2026 has been a transformational year for us. We have now integrated 2 significant businesses. It took us a good 6 months to understand and reposition our white label business. We took on 4,500 plus ATMs at that point in time that we came through. We rationalized the bottom performing 600 to 700 of those immediately, and we're in a repositioning phase for the final 1,500 of those over the coming 12 months. But most importantly, we've now got a significant warehouse of ATMs for us to roll out. And as said, when we turned on the sales channel, we've now delivered more than 1,233 franchisee sales in that pipeline. One of those sales was to a channel partner that has 1,000 white label ATMs that they can bring across to us. They have committed the first 100, and on successful delivery of those 100, they will then convert the final 900 that they have. And the reason why they came across to us was not a financial reason, it was a technology reason. We have a leading platform that we developed in-house called ATM 360, which enables franchisees to see all of their live ATMs and allocate resources accordingly to see whether they need cash replenishment, to see whether they have any maintenance issues or predictive maintenance coming up, which none of the other competitors in the market have. So it was good that it was a technology advantage for us as to why they've come across. And in the last announcement, we also stated that there is another significant, in excess of 1,000 ATM channel partner that we're also working on, and we're hopeful of announcing that pre-Christmas as well. There's a very real chance that we could almost deliver our entire 2026 sales pipeline for white label before Christmas of this year. So a very envious position for us to be in for the Indian team. Also mentioned, our digital business has grown greatly, up 43% since April of this year. At the end of September, we were at 5.1 billion. At the end of October, we're actually at 5.3 billion annualized GTV. So very, very happy with how that business is going. We've also just recently announced the acquisition of a small loyalty and rewards business, Sphere, which also provides ESG solution for the ability to offset the carbon footprint for digital transactions for our finance network. But most importantly, that loyalty and rewards will be built across FindiPay and Bankit and will be the first white label operator in the Indian market to have a rewards program for the ATM network. We also received non-binding commitments for a $30 million debt facility with scope for that to further increase. We're very happy that we're likely that is going to be upsized and will be closer to $50 million. And I look forward to updating the market in the next week or so as we bring that to fruition. And we also are expecting a significant commercial debt facility to be finalised in the coming week of a further $40 million, which means that our CapEx pipeline for the rest of 25 and 26 calendar year is all fully funded. So very happy with how they're progressing, and we'll formally update the market when those are finalised and put in place. Can we have next slide, please? I think this is just a quick visual slide to be able to show how far we've come in the last 24 months. Effectively, 2025 and prior, we did have a national footprint across India, but it wasn't a very, very dense footprint. As you can see now, with on the right-hand side there, we have great penetration of the odd 22,000 pin codes across India. We now have deep penetration in more than 14,000 of those. As said, there's including our ATMs and our KYC locations, more than 175,000 touch points now across India. We have more than 2 million people that use our products on a daily basis, and continuing to grow very, very strongly. Next slide, please. Just quickly touch on this. FY25, we delivered $61 million in revenue, operating revenue for the year. This year, we're expecting to deliver between $100 and $105 million of operating revenue for the year. So very, very strong growth from last year. Most importantly, the exit run rate that we're expecting to exit Q4 this year is in excess of $130 million exit run rate, and growing strongly. EBITDA last year delivered was $20.6 million from operating EBITDA. We're expecting to deliver a similar number for this year, excluding one-off items for FY26. But again, most importantly, the exit run rate for FY26 is in excess of $30 million EBITDA for March as we exit the FY26 financial year. So very strong trajectory that we've now gone through. And the banking facilities that I mentioned means that we're now fully funded as we go through. Our IPO process is on track for the second half of FY27. We're a 31 March year end, but as stated, the target listing window for us is December 2026 through to March 2027. And as I've said earlier, Rothschilds, who's our financial advisors on that process, have reconfirmed our IPO valuation ranges of 750 to 900 million. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. Yeah, there we go. So the acquisition of Sphere, I'll just quickly touch on before I go to the floor for questions. This is a small acquisition for us, but it really gives us a capability that we were needing to deliver us or build ourselves, which is a rewards capability across our business. So Sphere will be already provide rewards for the largest digital bank in Dubai, or the UAE. So it's a turnkey solution for us that we will apply across our white label business as well as our bank business as well. It also gives us operations in 3 other countries outside of India for our services in basically for Vietnam, Malaysia and Singapore. And then it also gives us another ESG-centric product that we will be able to provide and offer to all of our merchants, which is effectively carbon offsetting for all of the digital transactions that we do. And that'll be a market-leading position. And they partner currently now with Visa and in discussions with MasterCard to be able to roll that out across India with our existing significant banking relationships that we have on our ATM side of our business. So very, very happy with this acquisition, and we're looking to finalize this acquisition at the end of November. And as a result of this acquisition as well, on next slide, there are 2 new board members that are joining the business. Stephen Benton, who's the former CEO and MD of FPOS Australia, and he was head of consumer finance and emerging business and payments at Westpac. Stephen will bring great banking credentials to us as we transform into a full-fledged payments bank in India. And then Tine Matanda has a great background from Salter Brothers in private equity and venture capital funds with strong experience in emerging markets in Africa and Asia. So the addition of these two individuals to our business on the board level we see is very, very value added as we strive towards that Indian listing. I've spoken about the funding update and I'll leave it there and we can go to some questions.
Thanks, Nicholas. Great presentation. Clearly, it's been a tough year, as you've said in your presentation. There's sort of had to sort of put the head down and just get it done. There's some questions here around drop in EBITDA and probably a bit of a market misstep, I suppose, between the share price and value. Do you think that's just been because this has, in a lot of ways, had to be a very transitional year to get to where you are now? And I suppose the other element of that is the educative process to let shareholders know and the wider investment community know, not just about the business as it stands today, but sort of the big part of the business that's going to be value accretive in the coming years.
Yeah, correct. Betting down the two acquisitions that we went through, the white label business, if we look at where we've had probably the biggest miss or the biggest work to get our head around has been on that side of the business. We've now understood exactly where that portfolio is at. We're repositioning that, and now we've turned those sales back on. And for us, being able to deliver that 1,233 franchisee sales in a little over 45 days has been fantastic and really underpins the future of that business. And the fact that we've got two channel partners, that one of them could deliver in excess of 5,000 ATM locations and another will deliver another 900. As said, those all collectively will deliver almost 7,000 franchisee sales if they're all delivered. And that is our entire 2026 sales pipeline that could be done before Christmas. So it enables us to just focus on rollout and delivery of all of our numbers now. And all the integration is behind us, which is great.
And you talk to the integration, and there's some questions here. So that, there's no point not asking the question, but integration by nature is always a tough thing to go through. There's extra costs that you probably didn't necessarily see coming. There'll be some write-offs and other things. Is that sort of reflective of just the year you had to go through to really bed these things down properly? Take a few hits along the way, to be fair, but position the business to flourish moving forward.
Yeah, that's exactly what we have done. I mean, we've implemented a SAP system across everything. So everything now operates on one financial reporting system. We moved everything, all our Bankit merchants onto all of our FindiPay merchants onto the Bankit platform. So that's operating on one platform. As you would have seen in those financial numbers, we've taken a hit of about $7.1 million of additional one-off cost in this financial year, which we won't have going forward. But it was something that we had to do to ensure we had a fantastic base as we go into the IPO and beyond. And we're very happy with how numbers have rebounded on both revenue basis, a run rate to date that we updated the market just 2 weeks ago, and the exit run rate that we'll have for FY26 for March. We're on track to be delivering or exceeding those exit run rates, which is a testament to making the hard call, but the right call in the medium term for the business.
Now, let's look forward or look at the Indian business in particular. Momentum, I think, is a key word. What's driving that in the Indian market?
For us, it's our Bankit business and the rollout of BC Max centres and what we now call Unati centres as well, which is a white label version of our BC Max centre, which is effectively a financial hub and education centre where we become the trusted financial advisor in these communities. We've got an aspiration for there to be several thousand more of these over the coming 12 to 24 months. And they effectively become the cornerstone or the backbone of our branch network for our payments bank aspirations that we're looking to deliver. We've got the ability to continue to put more and more products through these centres. And as we put more and more products through, the margins expand on that business, which is where the future is for us.
scale. A business like this is really about scale and how you can scale it. How scalable is your digital payments infrastructure as you expand into new regions?
Well, our internal target is, at the moment, we're 165,000 K-wide seed locations. We would like to be at 1 million of those over the next 24 months plus. And we believe that that's still only a drop in the ocean in terms of where we can be. We think there is an addressable location available of about 55 million locations across India. So as I said, we're at 165,000 at the moment. We're targeting to be 1 million over the next 24 months. And we can would like to expand past that post the IPO.
Last few questions. Can you step us through your strategy to evolve into a full financial ecosystem provider?
Sure. So it's building out that Bankit business and closing the loop with cash and digital by co-locating at strategic sites, white label ATMs. The benefit of a white label ATM for us is we can directly market to that customer and capture that customer data as well. So that enables us a very low cost of acquisition for our digital business, which is a competitive advantage that none of the other players that we have that we're up against have. And we are slowly bringing on a product suite one by one to enable us to have more and more products that we have. As said in this presentation, we had 7 core products. We're going to 8. With those banking centers, there's actually another 20 odd banking products that we partner with the banks to provide, and it's how many more partnerships can we deliver over the coming period to increase that effectively what is a distribution as a platform business, increase the products that we have over the next 2, 3, 4 years of higher margin, higher value add products, and be the trusted location for these customers of ours.
Final question. What are the key milestones and catalysts for the next 12 months? What should investors be focused on?
For us, it would be franchisee numbers that we're bringing on for the sales channel and turning them into cash live locations for the white label side of the business. And then it's the GTV growing and margin expansion. At the moment, we're at about a 6% EBITDA margin. On that digital side of the business, we're wanting that to almost double as we lead into our IPO. And it's the exit run rates on a quarterly basis as we continue to grow into that December 2026 IPO window opening between then and March 2027. And we'll be looking to file our DRHP, which is our red herring or our corporate filings for the IPO on the completion of this year's financials. So around May, June of this year, that'll be done on a confidential basis. And then, as said, looking for about a 90 to 120 day approval window post that. So to be ready for listing in December of 2026.
A lot's been done, but setting yourself up for a massive 12 to 18 months. So, Nicholas, thanks for your time. We look forward to following with interest.
Thanks very much. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to everyone who joined us today. This concludes the first session in our new TechKnow Invest webinar series, which will now run regularly throughout the year as we build momentum towards next year's in-person TechKnow Invest conference. These ongoing online sessions will give investors increased access to companies across the technology, life sciences and biotech sectors well ahead of the live event. Our next webinar will be on the 2nd of December, and you'll receive details of that in due course. But get the calendars out ready for circling the dates of the 2026 TechKnow Invest Roadshow in-person conference. 29th of July 2026 will be in Sydney at the Swiss Hotel, and 30th of July 2026 will be in Melbourne at the Grand Hyatt. Put it in the calendars now. You do not want to miss it. A recording of today's webinar will be circulated shortly. We look forward to seeing you at our next TechKnow Invest webinar. Have a great day, everyone, and keep watching these stocks. Put them on your watch list and watch them with interest.